So hi everyone. My name is Tomasz Michalski. I will tell you a few words about us, who we are and how we got involved in the blockchain space, and after we start the main presentation about EOS. So who we are? First of all, we are entrepreneurs connected to manufacturing and real estate industry. I am the owner of Door Factory. Dominik is the owner of Furniture Factory. This factory employs together about 800 people. Jacek is the chairman of Real Estate Association, which has 8,000 members. So how we got involved in the blockchain space? So I started with LTC mining. It was in June 2013. It was a very small investment, but I'm proud of it, because thanks of that, I fell in love in technology and cryptocurrency idea. I realized it would be really big thing. Shortly after, I convinced my friend to invest in Bitcoin mining. We invested together about 130,000 US dollar, and we mined in late 2013, 2014, and 2015. In the meantime, we took a part also in a famous Ethereum crowd sale, which was in August 2014. As I remember, it was evaluated about $18 million that time. We survived a long bear market. We are typical digital asset hodlers. We don't speculate. In 2017, when the blockchain boom back, we decided to run Tokenika. Our founders are also Krzysztof Piech. He is a very famous person in the blockchain industry in Poland. He's a professor on Warsaw University and a big promoter of blockchain technology, even on the government level. Paweł Pacewicz, he is a big data analyst. GTG, who prefers to stay anonymous, but he's IT specialist and one of active Steam witness. And Jakub Zarębiński. Jakub has a banking experience, but first of all, he is an early adopter of Pitchers and Steam projects. These two projects are connected to visionary programmer Dan Larimer, who is also the CTO of EOS. Jakub intrigued us about EOS Spring this year, and we support it from the very beginning. In EOS, we are not only investors. We want to create EOS ecosystem. We expect that EOS brings new quality to the market. I mean, useful dApps which will be mass adopted and disrupt a lot of traditional business models. And at the end, I want to emphasize that we are not looking for any fundraising. We are looking for programmers, developers, people with smart ideas who want to run their application on the top of EOS blockchain. Okay, thank you very much. I give a voice to Dominik, who start the presentation with small survey. Thank you.
Hi guys. As Tomek said, we'll start with a survey. So we would like to get our common wisdom and see and point out some of the features and challenges of the blockchain technology. And it will be also a great foundation for the main presentation, which will be delivered by Jakub, and a little bit of a warm-up here. So as we talk about the technology, and I can see you are all looking for smartphones from time to time, you can now grab your smartphone officially and use it to log into this page and put this code into this page. So thanks to that, you will take part in our little experiment in which we would like to see how we perceive blockchain technology and blockchain utility. So please, we would like to take your involvement. In the end, you will ask questions, but first we would like to ask you some very simple questions. It's very simple, it's very safe and anonymous. So just take some time. We'll go through the 5 questions. Okay, so if you are ready, just raise your hand so I can see if we can start the survey. Okay, I can see some hands in the air, so we'll go. You need some time? Okay. Okay, just this address. This tool is called Mentimeter, and it's very useful in such situations. You will see it's quite fun. Oh, we already got some answers. So the first question was, what is the maximum number of transactions per second which can be handled by a payment system like Visa or MasterCard? So, you know, Visa and MasterCards are about 2 billion cards in use right now. So how many transactions they can process per 1 second? Okay, so I can see a lot of answers. New still coming. Okay. You will get all the answers in the our CTO presentation, Jakub. So remember what you put your bet on. Okay, we'll go to the next question. How many transactions per second can Ethereum currently handle? Is it less than 50 per second, around 500, around 5,000, more than 50,000 per second? Okay. Okay, we'll go to the first question. What percentage of Facebook daily traffic could be currently processed by Ethereum? So if we take all Facebook clicks, operations, and we transfer on Ethereum, how many of those can Ethereum handle? It's less than 0.1%, 10%, 20%, more than 50%. Okay, some skeptics or well-informed people. Okay, thank you. We'll go to the next one. So what is currently the total cost per year of securing the Bitcoin network? Is it less than 1/10 of million USD, around 10 million, around 100, more than 4 billion? Okay. Okay, coming to the next questions. Thank you for this one. Which blockchain has the biggest number of transactions per day generated by actual users? Is it Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, or Steam? Okay. Thank you guys very much for your participation. A lot of people took part. This is actually the introduction, so please remember your answers and listen carefully to Jakub's presentation. He will answer all the questions. Thank you very much for your involvement.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so tonight we'll be talking about a blockchain system called EOS. But first the disclaimer. So this presentation has been coordinated with Block One, which is the company developing EOS code. However, we are not part of Block One, and we are not in any way representing them. We are a separate entity. So we, okay. Okay, so let's start with the concept of a decentralized application. So what is a decentralized app? To make it really simple and to give you a concrete example, we might say that a decentralized app is like an Uber, but without the Uber company running it. This is the simplest way to put it. And building decentralized apps is not an easy task, because a lot of things that we take for granted when creating conventional web applications are not available in a decentralized environment. So before we talk about EOS, let's consider what a decentralized app needs in order to be a successful business and enterprise. Okay, so the first thing, it needs a platform that's cheap to run. This is quite obvious. So we need transaction fees that are low and predictable. Next thing, your users need to be able to access to interact with your app without paying anything. Your app needs to be available via mobile phones and web interfaces. Users should have account names, no public keys, no fancy cryptographic stuff. Your users need a procedure for account recovery in case they are hacked or they just lose their password. And if you're building a financial app, your users probably will expect privacy and confidentiality of transactions. And your app needs to be able to talk to other apps, including those on other blockchains. Your app needs to be upgradable so you can improve it to keep your business afloat. And finally, your app needs bug recovery. Software development is an imperfect art, so no matter how much effort you put into checking your code, bugs will always be happening. Okay, so is this list complete? I don't think so. Actually, we didn't mention about the single most important thing: high performance. If you want to host real-life businesses on the blockchain, we need high performance. So what is high performance? You need about 20,000 transactions per second just to do Visa and MasterCard, not to mention other payment systems. So I think you guessed pretty correctly on the survey. You are aware that those are high frequency systems. Facebook does more than 50,000 likes per second, not including all the posting and voting and other actions. And for currency trading, we'll need something like 100,000 transactions per second And this is just for a single currency pair. So imagine putting all of these on a single platform so they can interoperate. This would require like something like millions of transactions per second. So this is really massive scale. And what can the blockchain currently offer? Facebook does 4 transactions per second. Ethereum something like 15 and 30. So on the survey, I noticed that you are pretty well aware of this. And those systems are quite expensive. By means of inflation, we are paying like we are spending like $6 billion a year just to operate those systems. Okay. So, but you might say that it's just a matter of time before some scaling solutions are introduced. But actually, there are only 2 ways we can go with scaling solutions. We can move off-chain, which is basically the idea behind state channels. If it works, it will solve the problem for basic payments, but not for smart contracts. So we need more than this. And the other option is to create several independent subdomains within one blockchain, or create a hierarchy of multiple blockchains. This might help a little bit if you want to have many small businesses within one ecosystem. But if you want to compete with big businesses like PayPal, Uber, or eBay, or if you are into currency trading, this solves nothing, because for those systems, you need enormous processing power on a single blockchain, and oftentimes on a single CPU thread. Okay, so I think it's time to introduce EOS. So, and see what EOS can do about all those issues. Okay, so what is EOS? The simplest way to put it would be like this. EOS is a general purpose smart contract platform similar to Ethereum. That's a fair definition, but I prefer this one, as it perfectly captures the whole purpose behind EOS. You can read it on your own, but it basically says that EOS makes decentralized apps look and behave like conventional applications. Okay, so how does EOS work? Let's start with Ethereum. This is what Ethereum actually looks like. So we have this barebone computer. In this case, this is the Ethereum virtual machine. And on top of this, we have some applications trying to run on top of this computer. And those applications have a pretty tough job to do, because apart from some basic stuff like sending payments, like the ability to send funds or maybe store some data, they need to do pretty much everything else. And because everything is being implemented in the application layer, it's being done within relatively inefficient scripting environment, which makes it really hard. And this might explain why most of what we have right now in the crypto space are just prototypes with quite horrible user experience. Developers don't get to spend their time on building business logic and user interfaces. Instead, they're stuck on figuring out the low-level stuff like account permissions or data storage or inter-app communication. Furthermore, even if some generic solutions emerge as a result of this effort, they'll be very expensive to use, because every single line of their code will consume gas. So the whole thing actually reminds me of trying to build a mobile app on a smartphone without having Android or iOS at your disposal. So what are we missing here? Right. We need a blockchain operating system. And this is what EOS brings to the table. EOS is a blockchain operating system for running decentralized apps. And actually it's both the computer and the operating system. So it's both of these. Okay, so now let's go through the main features of EOS. There are lots of them, so let's divide them into 6 categories. And number 1 is processing power. I will start with a very bold claim. On day 1, EOS will be capable of 50,000 transactions per second, or even more. So let's see how it fits into our landscape. As you can see, it's on par with what the big businesses already need. And how is EOS going to achieve this? It's going to work in 2 dimensions. Firstly, by enormous speed of sequential processing. EOS uses a solution borrowed from currency exchange engine called LMAX, which is capable of millions of transactions per second on a single CPU thread. And on top of that, we'll have parallel processing, made possible thanks to clear separation between things which can be done in parallel and things which cannot. This is a very important distinction because not everything can be subjected to horizontal scaling. For example, managing an order book of a decentralized exchange needs to be done on a single thread, whereas things like validation on account of authentication can be done in parallel. And to give you a better picture of what it means, imagine this. Not so long time ago, all our computers had single core processors which can do one thing at a time. So this is sequential processing, and this is how all blockchains operate right now. And nowadays we have access to computers, and even our computers and even smartphones have access to multi-core processors which can do several things at the same time. And this is parallel processing, and this is what EOS will be capable of. And no other blockchain currently can do this because it requires a completely different architecture. Okay, so feature number 2, built-in governance. In the heart of EOS, we have a consensus mechanism called DPOS, which stands for Delegated Proof of Stake. It's a very sophisticated system, but here's a very brief overview. In DPOS, block producers are elected by the token holders, each voting according to their stake. So it's not the hash power that determines who has the right to produce a block. Instead, we have token holders taking a vote and electing 20, it's usually 20 block producers. And what's important, they can easily switch their votes, so whenever they want. Okay, so as a result, we have a system that is powered by reputation, so it's very hard to be elected and very easy to lose the job. Okay, so back to EOS. EOS implements DPOS, this delegated proof of stake, and extends it even more. In EOS, block producers do much more than just produce blocks. For example, they have the ability to freeze and fix broken apps So had the DAO incident happened on EOS, it would have been easily contained within a few hours. And what else have we got? We have complete governance structure. So we have a legally binding constitution, an entire arbitration system for resolving disputes, and we have shareholders voting on things like level of inflation, on how to distribute the income from inflation. So in general, EOS works like a giant self-governed decentralized application whose business is running other decentralized applications. Okay, so feature number 3, infrastructure for apps. In EOS, developers only need to write code for what's unique for their apps. All common features, including the low-level stuff, are provided by the blockchain. And those features include things like account permissions, account recovery, scheduling, authentication, inter-app communication, and even biometric second-factor validation. And probably this list will be extended in the future. So maybe account recovery is especially interesting here. Here is how it works. If you get hacked and as a result lose control of your account, you can get it back, provided you can prove that you know the password, the previous password before it was changed by the hacker. And in EOS, it gets even better. If there's no hacker involved, you just lost your password, you can regain access to your account and using EOS social network feature. And on top of this, we have an integrated storage, a built-in storage solution based on IPFS and maintained by block producers as part of their job. Okay, and this is my favorite, no transaction fees. So your EOS tokens are never consumed. You can, if you are an EOS token holder, you can access the system for free without paying anything. And because there is no concept of transaction fees or gas. So the deal is very simple. If you own 1% of the tokens, you own 1% of the network, including all its resources, its bandwidth, and data storage capacity. So as a result, you can monetize your app any way you want, because by default, your users will have access to the platform for free. Okay. And feature number 5, upgradable apps. In EOS, you publish on the blockchain the source code of your application, not the compiled machine code, as this is the case in Ethereum. So does it make any difference? Actually, it does, because firstly, your intentions conveyed in the source code become part of the blockchain consensus. So this matters if there are any disputes around your smart contracts. But the second consequence is even more significant. This means that the source code of your application can be recompiled in the future. So you can make your smart contracts upgradable if you opt to retain permission to do so. So it's up to you to decide if you want to be able to upgrade your app and fix bugs on your own, or if you opt out of this feature, you can make your app fully autonomous. And finally, asynchronous communication. So basically, EOS works like a giant email server. Everything is based on sending and receiving messages So the entire communication in EOS is asynchronous, which is the opposite of, by the way, it is the opposite of Ethereum's architecture. And it just happens that asynchronous communication is the only way to arrange communication between blockchains. So as a result, EOS apps can communicate with each other within within the same blockchain, and also across different blockchains. So if we had multiple EOS blockchains, both private and public, everything could be fully interconnected. Okay, so here we have all those features listed together. And everything, as you can see, everything is revolving around one purpose: to help you build and run decentralized businesses. So the processing power makes your app fast and scalable. Built-in governance offers you a safety net in case something goes wrong, or in case there are some disputes around your smart contracts. Infrastructure saves you a lot of development costs, and also operational costs, because you can utilize all the features that are provided by the blockchain without paying anything. The absence of transaction fees gives you flexibility about the way you can monetize your app. And your app is fully upgradable if you choose so you can improve it and fix bugs on your own. So this nicely corresponds with this built-in governance. So you can either fix the bugs on your own, or if you make your app fully autonomous, you can rely on this governance system on the block producers to help you out in case something goes really, really wrong. And finally, asynchronous communication opens you up to interactions with other blockchains. Okay, so now I'd like to talk a little bit about EOS origin. Basically, there are two ways of building a smart contract platform. You can start with creating the whole thing and then try to build some apps on top of it. And you'll be probably confronted with tough reality with when you try to make those apps actually useful. But this is the prevailing approach in the crypto space. And the other option is to first build a couple of concrete, non-trivial blockchain apps, make some mistakes when doing this, learn from those mistakes, then as a next step, figure out what's common between your apps, and only then start building the abstraction layer. And this is actually how EOS was born. So the developers behind EOS have already built some of the most successful blockchain apps in the crypto space. And now they set out to leverage their experience and build a general purpose platform. And when I said most successful apps, I didn't necessarily mean market capitalization. What I mean is how useful those apps are in the eyes of users, not investors or speculators, but actual users. So let's take a look at this graph. Those two systems, BitShares and Steam, are those two systems that have been built by the same team that are now behind EOS. And those are very different systems. BitShares is a decentralized exchange, whereas Steam is a social media platform. And as you can see, Steam is the most used application in the entire crypto space. So I think you didn't expect this. Probably most people think it's Ethereum that's is most used, but actually Steam is much more popular among actual users. And by the way, it does something like 8 transactions per second, which is close to 1 million per day, and which, by the way, is less than 1% of its total capacity, which is, you can compare it with Ethereum, which is approaching its limit. Okay, and this is what the user interfaces of those two apps look like. As you can see, those are quite complex apps, and they still have their deficiencies, but actually they work smoothly enough to trick you into thinking that they might be just conventional web applications. And they have some useful features. For example, account recovery, which we discussed a while ago, was first introduced in Steam. And so a lot of EOS features originate from those two systems. And one more interesting thing is, as you can see, those two systems have very valid business cases, but actually none of them could be hosted on any existing smart contract platform, including Ethereum. Why is this? There are two reasons. Firstly, because those two little apps would eat up all of Ethereum processing power. But the second reason is even more significant. Steam business model requires that user actions are free of charge, because otherwise nobody would upvote anything or post anything. This is a social network platform, so things need to be easily available without any conditions. And guess what? Ethereum, with its concept of gas, is not able to offer this functionality, and probably never will, because it's a very fundamental feature of Ethereum. Okay. And one more topic. There's an ongoing controversy regarding delegated proof of stake, or DPOS, which is the consensus mechanism which is going to be applied in EOS. And some people claim that some people dismiss EOS, claiming that its reliance on DPOS makes it not decentralized enough. I'm going to present you some data which sheds some light on this issue. Let's look at this chart. It shows how diversified the process of block production is in various systems, including proof of Bitcoin and Ethereum, which is proof of work, and BitShares and Steam, which are using delegated proof of stake, or DPOS. And as you can see, DPOS is doing pretty well here. It's very diversified. And actually, we could say DPOS is the most decentralized system out there, if we take into account the top 80% of the blocks. So, because real diversity is only above 80% in those systems. And why 80%, not 100%? It's because if you are a tiny player in this game, in the game of block production, your existence doesn't really matter. You have zero impact. So everything, all that matters is the top 80%. And of course, you might say that this picture is not fair, because those big areas are mining pools, and behind each mining pool there are a lot of miners. That's a fair point, but actually the same applies to DPOS. Behind all of those block producers, there are many token holders voting for them. So the only difference is that in proof of work, you vote with your hash power, whereas in systems like DPOS, you work with, you vote with your stake. But the underlying principle is the same. You delegate your power to some bigger third party, which does the block production on your behalf. Okay. And now, very quickly about EOS strong points. Okay, we have very efficient team implementing EOS, and I think the best example is Steam. It was conceived, created, and launched in just 4 months, and it's quite complex application. So very small team did it in less than 4 months. Okay. WebAssembly. EOS uses WebAssembly for running smart contracts, and WebAssembly is a big deal because it's an emerging industry standard for web applications, supported by Google, Microsoft, and Apple. Basically, it's a universal compile target for several languages like C++, Java, and JavaScript, and even Solidity in the future. Okay, and regarding financial supporters, we have some big names here, and interestingly, those two guys were also early investors in Ethereum, and they still are, so they're betting on both systems. And last but not least, we have a declaration from EOS founders to spend about $1 billion on supporting the emerging ecosystem around EOS. And this is where most of the funds from the currently running ICO will go, not on EOS code development, as this is already fully funded, but on those of you who will try to do something useful with EOS. Unsurprisingly, EOS has its own weak points. Yeah, the ecosystem around EOS has not emerged yet, so it might be difficult for EOS to catch up with the high number of developers currently involved with Ethereum. C++ right now is the only way to write smart contracts on EOS. This will surely change as WebAssembly gets upgraded and as there are multiple other virtual machines added to EOS, but right now you have to know C++ to do it. And EOS source code might be a bit of a challenge to, it's a little bit difficult to work with, and as one of our friends put it, it's an act of constant balancing between cutting edge and bleeding edge, and unfortunately, oftentimes it's just bleeding too much, but it doesn't affect those of you who just want to write smart contracts. It affects entities like us who try to integrate deeply with EOS, but I think it's a matter of time. And finally, track record of pull documentation. Unfortunately, this is true, but hopefully this will change this time around. And the system is not live yet, but it will be in June next year, which brings us to the roadmap. Currently, we are at this minimum viable product stage, and so you can run EOS on your local machine. In a couple of days, there'll be a subsequent release called Dawn 2.0 and a public testnet up and running. And the final release is expected to be in June next year. And now very quickly, let's revisit the demands required by decentralized apps. And as you can see, EOS is doing a pretty good job here, as almost everything is covered. Everything you could think of is really well covered, maybe except this privacy protection. I'm not aware of any special features in EOS regarding zero-knowledge cryptography or untraceable transaction, but this might change in the future. And finally, to wrap it up, I think what sets EOS apart is not just the technology, it's the unique way it's going to operate. And when you look at EOS features, this might seem like a revolution, but actually it's an evolution, because EOS builds on solutions which have already been battle tested in real life applications. So this is not really experimental stuff. This is an extension of stuff that already works. Okay, we must admit that Ethereum is an excellent playing field for smart contract prototypes, whereas EOS takes the notion of smart contracts to the next level and makes the whole thing extremely business-oriented. And this is a very valid question. Can other systems copy EOS solutions? And the answer is not really, because as we've seen, EOS is quite different from anything else on a very deep level. So for other systems to follow EOS path, they would have to backtrack a lot regarding very fundamental elements of their technology. So it's quite unlikely. Okay, and just to wrap it up, final slide. This graph shows the conclusion we have reached when observing how the blockchain technology evolves. So back in 2008, we started with a very simple payment system, which inspired an amazing smart contract system, which now is being challenged by an entire, a fully blown operating system, not just for smart contracts, but for blockchain-based applications. So will EOS replace Ethereum? I don't think so, at least not in the predictable future. But what will probably happen is EOS playing similar role for Ethereum as Ethereum is playing for Bitcoin. Okay, and just very quickly about our company. So our focus is on blockchain-based fundraising and digital asset management solutions. And we are in the process of setting up a software house for building decentralized apps, both Ethereum and EOS. And we're aiming to be elected as EOS Witness, which is just another name for EOS block producer. And this will be a very tough competition, but we have some experience with this, as one of our advisors is already a very successful witness for Steam. And okay, and as Tomek said, we are not looking for funding, more looking for ways of spending money, and we are looking for good ideas that can be turned into decentralized apps, especially on EOS. And we are hiring. So if you have some background with C++ and smart contracts, we definitely look forward to talking to you. Okay, so thank you. And if you have any questions, we'll be very happy to answer them. And you can reach out to us on all those. And if you can check out EOS on the official website. Okay, thank you. Yeah. a part of the part of the inflation will be spent on block producers, and it's the shareholders who decide how much of this. The constitution guarantees that probably the inflation will be not higher than 5%, and what portion of this 5% will go to block producers will be decided by shareholders. So if EOS is valued like something like $3 billion, it will be, for 20 block producers, it will be quite a lot of money, but it still be it will not be comparable to those $6 billion spent on proof of work systems. So it will be, but at the same time, block producers will have a lot of responsibilities, not just running, not just producing blocks, but also being responsible for the whole system and also running the data storage solution. So it's a range of responsibilities. Yep. Yep. Yes. Okay, so he's asking if there's a limit on the number of the amount of tokens ever issued in the future. Such things will be decided in the constitution. So it's not decided yet. But before the launch, I expect that there will be some sort of convention of future shareholders, and they will decide on things like this. And those things will be written down in the constitution, and the constitution will be embedded in the blockchain. So it's some sort of guarantee that this will hold. Yep. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. You have account names. So behind actually there are public keys, but they are not visible on the interface. So this is the way, for example, Steam works. You don't need any knowledge about blockchains, whatever to use it. It looks like a normal app. So you have a username. Yep. But underneath there's a normal blockchain or all this cryptography, but it's just hidden away from the user. Yep. Yep. Actually, the block producers are responsible for this. It's up to them to decide if they just measure the time that some code the code is using, and they can decide to just not accept it. So, but if they are abusing this right, they will be just voted out. So you need to be careful about this. If you reject a valid piece of code, then you can be voted out. But if there's an infinite loop, you just stop executing the code and reject it. Yeah. There's an ongoing ICO, and which is quite special because it's been running for half a year, and it will be running for the next 6 months. So we are in the midpoint right now. So there's still, you can still buy it on the primary market. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. 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 I understand the question. So it's called rate limiting because you can only use as much of the network resources as proportional to the number of tokens you have. So you would need something like 50% of the tokens to really do some damage to this. But if you have like less than 1% of the tokens, you can only use 1% of the capacity. So you cannot hurt the system really. So it's well thought out, I think. Any other questions? Okay, I think that's it.